Simon says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
At this point in this section, we should be reasonably familiar with what an if statement does. So in this lesson, we're going to move things along a little bit and we're going to take a look at nested if statements. Now, nested if statements are pretty much what you might imagine them to be. They are if statements inside other if statements. So why might you want to use these and how do we put them together? Now in this lesson, we're just using an employee database. So in column A, we have some employee names. We have the building they're located in, the department, their hire date, the number of years they've been working at the company, their salary, and then they have a job rating. And this job rating column is pivotal to this lesson. Now, this job rating might be an overall score that they've achieved in their last review, with 1 being the lowest job rating and 5 being the highest. And these job ratings might have been based on various different factors, maybe scores from other disciplines. But it ends up that every employee is given a job rating. Now, for our best performing employees, so those employees that have a high job rating, those lucky people are going to be getting bonuses. And you can see over on the right hand side here, we've got the bonuses that we're going to assign to each of the job ratings. So effectively over here, we can use if statements to look at the job rating for each employee and then match it over here in the table and return the bonus. Now, I will say before we even start doing this, you could do this using lookups as well, but we're going to use nested if statements just to practice those instead. So let's click in the first cell. We're going to say equals, and we're going to type in if. So what is our logical test here? Well, we're testing if the job rating is equal to, and we'll say 5 first of all. If that's true, they're going to get a bonus of 3,000, comma. Now, at this stage, we don't add a false argument in at the moment. We go straight into our next if to perform our next logical test. And this is why they're called nested if statements. So our next logical test is if the job rating is equal to 4, if that's true, they're going to get a bonus of 1,500, comma, next if. If the job rating is equal to 3, they're going to get a bonus of 900, and we're going to carry on going. If the job rating is equal to 2, then they're going to get a bonus of 100. And then when we get to the last one, we could specify this in the same way, or alternatively, we could just add our false argument. Because the false argument in this case will basically say, if the job rating doesn't match anything else that we've specified, then they're not going to get a bonus. So our false argument could be a blank, or it just simply could be a 0. So now we can close off our bracket, but look at how many brackets we've opened. Remember in Excel, you always need to close off as many brackets as you open. So I'm going to add a few more brackets in, and you can see as I'm doing that, it's moving back. As soon as that little screen tip disappears, then you know that you've entered in enough brackets. It's also worth noting that if you don't enter in enough, Excel will prompt you and will fix it automatically for you. Now let's see what we get here. Let's press enter. I'm going to double click to copy this down and, well, that doesn't look too great, does it? So what have I done wrong? Let's double click. Well, I haven't made any of these cell references absolute. So as I'm dragging this down, it's moving these cell references down. So I want to make sure that I go through and anything that's being referenced in the table in column J and K, I want to make sure that I press F4 to lock all of those references because we don't want those to move. So I'm just quickly going to go through and do that like so. Now let's press enter, and when we double click to copy down, we should find that that looks a lot better. Now notice that we have this little green triangle in the corner. Wherever you see a green triangle, that's always a warning. Let's click to see what it says. So it's simply telling me that this is an unprotected formula, meaning I haven't locked these cells so anybody can come in and change this formula. Now I'm not too worried about that, so I'm going to select the entire column, Control-Shift down arrow. Let's click that warning triangle and just say ignore error. Control up arrow to jump to the top. So let's do a quick spot check and make sure that these totals are correct. So up here, Lisa Page, she has a job rating of 1, which means she's going to get no bonus, and that is correct. The next employee, Hector Taylor, he has a job rating of 4, which means he's going to get a bonus of 1,500. The next employee, Jonathan Dawson, he's been very good. He's got a job rating of 5, which means he's going to get a bonus of 3,000. So that is a nested if statement. And if you take a look in the formula bar, you'll see that that is pretty long. There are definitely shorter ways that we can do this, including another logical function called IFS. And in this example, we could also have used an X lookup or a V lookup, which would have been a much shorter formula. But this should hopefully give you an idea as to exactly what nested if statements are, so that you know how to use them if you need to. In the previous lesson, we saw how we could use nested if statements in order to calculate the bonus for each employee based on their job rating. And if you recall, I mentioned that the nested if statement formula was pretty long. So in this lesson, we're going to take a look at an alternative that is slightly shorter, and that is the ifs function. Now, the ifs function was released in 2019, so it is a newer function. Nested if statements have been around much longer. But this is a bit of a quicker notation when it comes to creating effectively nested if statements. So I wanted to make sure that you could get a direct comparison. So we're going to use the same data. We need to complete the bonus column, and we're going to determine which employee gets a bonus and how much by their job rating. So let's use the IFS function this time. So we're going to type it in. Our first argument is logical test 1. So once again, we're going to say if the job rating is equal to 5, and we're going to press F4 to lock, comma, if that's true, they're going to get a bonus of 3,000, F4 to lock, comma. Now, in nested if statements, this is where we would then go in with our next if. But with the IFS function, you don't actually need to do that. You can just move on to your next logical test. So we can say, okay, if this is equal to this, F4 to lock. If that's true, they're going to get 1,500. Now we're into logical 3. If this is equal to this, they're going to get a bonus of 900. And if this is equal to this, F4 to lock, they're going to get a bonus of 100, F4 to lock. And one difference with the IFS formula over nested if statements is that there is no false argument. So I could just close off the formula here, or I could specify. So if we say if this is equal to this, then they're going to get nothing. Let's close, hit enter, and then we can double clickety-click to copy down, and we should find that we get the same results. Now, once again, I can see that we have this green triangle, so Control-Shift down arrow to select the entire column, and we're going to say it's fine that the formula is unprotected. We're going to ignore the error, Control up arrow to jump to the top. So whilst this is very slightly shorter because we're not having to add in if each time, it is still quite a lengthy formula. But just know that there is an alternative to nested if statements, and I know that a lot of people do find this a little bit easier to understand. Give both methods a good practice, and I'm sure you'll find which one is your favourite. It's time now to take a look at conditional ifs. And when I say conditional ifs, I mean specifically 3 functions: COUNTIFS, SUMIFS, and average ifs. Now, you'll notice in the title here that where we have COUNTIFS, SUMIFS, and average ifs, I've put the S in brackets. Now, the reason why I've done that is because there are singular versions of these formulas as well. So COUNTIF, SUMIF, and average if without the S. Now, I've chosen not to show you the singular version in this course. What's the reason for that? Well, you don't actually need them now that we have the plural version with the S on the end, because COUNTIFS, SUMIFS, and average ifs can do exactly the same as COUNTIF, SUMIF, and average if, and they can also do more. So let's take a look at how they work. So we're going to start out with SUMIFS. Now, notice in this table here, we have a list of sales agents that work on the sales team. We have the company that they're assigned to, we have their job title, and we have the total amount of sales that they've generated. And what I want to do over here is I want to sum the sales based on different pieces of criteria. So for the first calculation here, you can see I've got Microworld highlighted in green. So basically, I want to perform a calculation that says sum the total sales when the company is equal to Microworld. So we basically have a logical test with some criteria. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in equals SUMIFS. Now, this formula has 3 arguments: sum range, criteria range 1, and criteria 1. So the first thing you need to specify is what you want to sum. So in this first example, we're summing the total sales for Microworld. So our sum range is going to be the total sales range, comma, criteria range 1. Now, the way I think about this is I like to think about what my criteria is first, and then my criteria range is just where I'm going to find that piece of criteria. So my criteria is Microworld. Where am I going to find that? Well, I'm going to find it in the company range. So that is my criteria range, comma. What's my criteria? My criteria is Microworld, F6. Close the bracket, hit enter, and I get my result. So this is the total amount of sales where the company is equal to Microworld. Now, in the next example, we're taking this up a level because we have 2 pieces of criteria. This time, I want to sum all of the sales for the sales reps at Microworld only. So let's type in equals SUMIFS. Our sum range is the total sales. Criteria range 1. Well, our first piece of criteria is Microworld again. So our criteria range is where we're going to find that, which is the company range. Our criteria is Microworld. But now if I press comma, it moves on to criteria range 2. So we can carry on going. So my next piece of criteria is that they must be sales reps. Where are we going to find this? Well, we're going to find it in the job title column. That is our criteria range, comma, and our criteria is sales rep. Close the bracket, hit enter, and we get our result. And the final example here, we have 3 pieces of criteria. So let's jump straight into our SUMIFS again. Our sum range is the total sales. Criteria range 1 is the company. Our criteria is Microworld. Criteria range 2 is the job title. The criteria is sales rep. And now our third piece of criteria is we only want to sum sales that are greater than 7,000. So what's our criteria range going to be here? Well, it's going to be the total sales column, and our criteria is going to be this cell, or you could type in greater than 7,000. So I'm going to select the cell. Let's close the bracket, hit enter, and we get our result. And if you wanted to just do a quick visual check of this to make sure that all your numbers are correct, let's go through and let's highlight those sales. So wherever we have Microworld sales rep, so that cell just there, and there are no other records that match that piece of criteria. So the total sales should be 7139, and I can see that yes, it is. Now, COUNTIFS works in a very similar way, except instead of summing, we're counting. So let's do equals COUNTIFS. So in this first example, I want to count the total number of employees at Computech. So my criteria range is the company, comma, my criteria is Computech. Close the bracket, hit enter, and I can see that there are 6 sales agents at Computech. Let's do this example. So the next one, this time we're trying to calculate the total number of employees at Computech with the job title of sales manager. So our criteria range is the company. Our criteria is Computech. Criteria range 2 is the job title. Criteria is sales manager. Close the bracket, hit enter, and there are 3 sales managers at Computech. And we can see there's one, and there's the third. And then finally, we want to count the total number of employees at Computech with the job title of sales manager and less than 9,000 in sales. So equals COUNTIFS. Criteria range 1 is the company. Hopefully you're getting the idea. Repetition is the best way to learn. Criteria is Computech. Criteria range 2 is the job title. Criteria is sales manager. And finally, criteria range 3 is the sales. And the criteria is what we have in cell H16. Close the bracket, hit enter, and we get a result of 2. And if I highlight those in the table, you can see that 2 of them have less than 9,000 in sales. And then the final one, I've just got 2 examples here because it works exactly the same, is average ifs. So this is if we want to calculate averages for multiple pieces of criteria. So this time we just want to work out the average of the sales for Computech. So our average range is going to be the sales. Our criteria range is going to be the company, and our criteria is going to be Computech. Close the bracket, hit enter. There is our average. Let's finish off the set and do the final one, average ifs. This time we're working out the average sales for people who work at Computech with the job title of sales rep. Average range is this range just here. Criteria range is this range. Criteria 1 is Computech. And then finally, criteria range 2 is the job title, and the criteria is sales rep. Close the bracket, hit enter, and we have our result. So hopefully you can see there how useful these functions could be. In fact, both COUNTIFS and SUMIFS have been voted amongst Excel users as two of the most useful functions. Give them a practice. Hopefully we've repeated this enough times that they are now solidified in your brain. Check them out, have a play around, and I'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to talk through two other logical functions, IFERROR and IFNA. And both of these are what we classify as error handling functions. And that's exactly what they do. They help us handle errors in formulas. So I'm going to show you how to use both of them, and we'll just walk through what the difference is between them, because there isn't too much of a difference. Now, we're using our employee data again. But this time, notice in column H, we have a lot of NA errors. Now, why do we have these errors in here first of all? Well, if we click on the first cell and take a look in the formula bar, I can see that I'm using the IFS formula, and let's just check through what this formula is doing. So the first logical test is testing if G4 is equal to J4. So that looks about right. So if G4 is equal to J4, then we want it to output the bonus of 3,000. That looks fine to me. What about the next logical test? Well, this time it's saying if G4 is equal to J5, output the result in K5. Again, that looks to be correct. But that's where the formula ends. So this formula is only accounting for employees that have received a job rating of 4 or 5. Anybody who's got 3, 2, or 1 isn't accounted for in this formula. And that is why when we've copied this formula down, anybody who does have a job rating of under 4 has an NA error, because the formula can't reference the job rating because we haven't told it to. Now, maybe in this example, only the people with a job rating of 4 or 5 are going to get a bonus, and that's why we've done this. But when we've constructed our formula, we've been pretty surprised that we have all of these NA errors appear in the cells. Why doesn't it just say nothing? Well, that is because we need to tell the formula that we don't want anything in the cell if there is an error. So basically what I want it to do here is wherever it finds NA, I want it to just have a blank cell because those people aren't getting a bonus. Now, this leads me on nicely to the difference between IFNA and IFERROR. Both of these are formulas that will handle errors, but the IFNA formula can only be used when you have NA errors in cells. There are lots of different types of errors that we can get in cells in Excel, and if we try and handle those with IFNA, it's not going to work. It only deals with specifically NA errors, whereas IFERROR will deal with any error. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be an NA, it could be a div, it could be a value, it could be a name error. IFERROR is kind of your catch-all. So let's start out with IFNA. I'm going to go up to the formula bar and we're going to edit this formula, and we're simply going to add IFNA on the front here. Now, IFNA only has two arguments, value and value IFNA. So the value in the cell is being generated by this formula. So we need to click at the end here, comma. We now just need to specify what we want to have in the cell whenever it comes across an NA. Now, I want this cell to be blank, so I'm going to put in 2 quote marks. You could put in here some text, something like no bonus. I just want a blank, so 2 quote marks, close the bracket, hit enter, and then we can simply double click to recopy that down, and now this looks a lot better. And I would always recommend that if you do have things like NA errors in spreadsheets, that you do add error handling in. Because if you send this spreadsheet to somebody else and they see all of these NA errors all over the place, they might not necessarily know why those NA errors are there. They don't know that it doesn't really matter. So it's a lot better for you to handle them before you send this out to anybody. And just to quickly show you if error, it does work in exactly the same way. So if we type if error on the front here instead, you can see that we have exactly the same arguments. So value and value if error. So this time I'm going to say I want to have no bonus in the cells instead. Hit enter, and then we can double clickety-click to copy that down. Those errors are now handled and our spreadsheet looks a lot cleaner.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.